So if you're anything like me, you went onto the Charlemagne banner to try to go ahead and get yourself Crimhild, or maybe you actually just like Charlemagne himself, but the brain geniuses over at Lysengel decided to put Roland, another gold saber, on the banner, and he will be popping up in a lot of people's summons. If you're anything like me, you didn't get Crimhild, you got a bunch of Rolands and a bunch of random 5 stars. Which I'm not really complaining about, but I wanted to get Crimhild, man. But after kind of thinking about it, getting NP2 Roland, I've reflected. I'm like, that's not all that bad, and I need to make this video so people who also get shafted on the banner, or quote-unquote shafted on the banner, and end up with a ton of different Roland copies, know that they didn't actually get shafted. See, Roland is one of those units that I think if you use at NP1, he doesn't feel super great. Like, he's not really doing too much. But if you can get higher copies of him, because he doesn't really have any gimmicks or power mods or anything, he just feels a lot better to do, because he's just supposed to do really good raw damage, and he has a lot of intricacies in his kit, or I guess just good pieces in there, like say good survivability, spammable skills, the ability to pierce invul, that make him just a good DPS all around, but you're probably not going to bring him over one of your other single target sabers until you get him at higher NP copies. And well, thankfully, not only are you going to be seeing a lot of him on the banner, but he's also not story locked, he's not limited, so you'll be seeing him on every single banner. So strap in, get comfortable, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you like being informed on all things going on the NA and JP version of the game. Although I do know that I'm going to be a day late for the FGO festival, announcements or whatnot, but dude, I'm tired, I gotta go to bed. 7:45 a.m. my time, that was just never gonna happen. But with that being said, let's start off by looking at his hits, of which he is rocking the Double Buster Double Arts deck, which I think is very strong, because you would want to pair him with people like Merlin. Obviously, you could use him with Koyenskaya, who will allow his Buster cards to refund 10% per Koyenskaya skill that you have on him, so that could help out with his refund. But having the double Merlin and him having double Arts cards means you could find some pretty consistent Arts Brave Chains, so Merlin could provide him the stars he needs to do big crits, give him a bunch of extra sustainability by giving him HP, and also helping him stay on top of firing his NP with some kind of spammability, because you do want to spam Roland's NP, and one of the things that I've kind of found with him is that it's a little hard to do, just because his batteries aren't the largest, but they are kind of spammable. It's a bit weird, but with 0.83% NP gain, he can get some pretty decent refund, as you'll be seeing in the background, when even fighting Berserkers. Even though he only has 2 arts cards, I do believe just having that very high natural NP gain is what is allowing him to do that. But there's really nothing remarkable about his hits or even his passive skills. I mean, it's nice to have 20% debuff resistance, but the 10% quick buff is always going to be super baffling for a lot of these random servants that don't really use their quick cards. I guess you can think of it as extra NP refund whenever you do find the quick card. When Mighty Chains come out, that'll be kind of nice for Anniversary, but as of right now, you're probably not going to use it. But with that being said, let's start diving into some of his skills, starting off with skill 1, where the boy is going to be giving himself 1 turn of invincibility and 1 turn of 100% defense with a 20% battery on a 6-turn cooldown. You might be confused being, hey, ZTO, why does this guy have double survivability? And I'm assuming the whole shtick for this is to really make sure that your Roland doesn't get killed when going into a boss fight, because some bosses will have Pierce Invincibility, or they might remove the latest defensive buff that you gave to him, and in those corner cases, he'll still be able to tank the hit with 100% defense, because how FGO calculates defense is that if you have 100%, you don't take any damage. That's why back in the day, people would use stuff like Bedivere Mash waiver combos to try to make these invincible teams that had just 100% defense at all times, so they just physically took no damage. And even though most bosses are probably going to remove all of your buffs, there are, again, some of those bosses that remove the latest buff from you, and so being able to get rid of the invincibility still leaves you with the defense. I think it's very nice, because you can pretty much ensure, outside of a mass removal of all your buffs, you're going to retain living for that turn, which I think is really nice. And then the 20% battery might seem a little bit small. You might be like, oh man, I got this guy to NP5 and I wanted to use him for Buster farming, for some single target shenanigans, right? I wanted to loop his NP with Koyenskaya. Don't worry, he does have another battery, so you can get up to that ideal 30%, which will allow him to do some looping. But let's move over to the second skill, which is kind of just a nice skill in general. He's giving himself a 30% buster buff for 3 turns. He buff cleanses himself and then removes all of the enemy's buffs, which is really crazy. The only weird thing is that he lowers his charm resistance by 50% for 3 turns. I'm assuming that's just Roland and being a bit goofy, but realistically, how often are you running into a Kama boss battle or a Shuten boss battle? Like, it's probably not that big of a deal. It's probably not going to mess you up in really any meaningful way, but if you do forget about it and you're going into some battle that does have charm, you might be in for a bad time. But overall, it's very, very strong, giving him just a solid buster buff for free, allowing him to cleanse his own buffs, which, I mean, doesn't work on stuff like stun, which is a little bit annoying because you're stunned, you can't use any of your skills. But, you know, if he gets NP sealed or he gets hit with a lot of damage over time, burn, poison, curse, stuff along those lines, you could just cleanse all that, and it's super, super nice. And then being able to yeet all of the enemy buffs, I think is just very funny. It's giving the bosses a bit of a taste of their own medicine, you could say, when it's like, all right, you're gonna remove all my buffs, I'm removing all of your buffs, you know, get them out of here. But then we have his third skill, which I think is where Roland is trying to do something new. I mean, it's not like this is a new thing, having a strong skill on a very low cooldown, where he's going to be bombing 20 stars, giving himself star weight, and then getting a 10% battery on a 3-turn cooldown. This is kind of nice because it does allow Roland, who kind of wants to be a crit servant, when we look at his NP in a second, he kind of wants to be a crit servant, but he also really wants to spam his NP to become a crit servant and to also do some pretty solid damage, so he's a little bit weird in that fashion. And I'm assuming that's the thought behind the skill. Give him extra stars, give him star weight so he can be a crit servant, and then give him a nice 10% battery that just might be enough to get him to his own NP if he's at 90%, or if you're pairing him with, say, a Merlin, maybe that 10% gets him to 80%, so then Merlin's charisma can get him to his own NP. Maybe that's the thought behind it. It's definitely an interesting skill. I think it works better with, say, someone like Koyenskaya, who will allow you to spam this skill, and maybe that's why they made it the way they did, because one Koyenskaya battery does reduce the cooldown by 2, effectively making this able to fire on the next turn instead of it being the next 3 turns, which, with Koyenskaya being out for about a year now over here on the NA side of things, or I guess when she originally released over on JP when Roland was made, I'm assuming that's probably what the thought was behind it. And if so, I think that's pretty well designed. I think it works out kind of well, but if you're like me and you don't have Koyenskaya on the JP side of things where I was recording my footage for Roland, because I already had him leveled up, it can be a little underwhelming. But still nice whenever you do get it every couple of turns. Anyway, moving over to his NP, this is a very, very strong one. He has Pierce Invincibility built in, which you know I love to see on my DPSs. Gets around, dodges, invul gimmicks, just the whole 9 yards. It is so, so nice. And then you'll see on his overcharge effect, this is where he gets extra attack and extra crit damage, and those stack for 3 turns starting at 20% a pop, which can be very nice. And the attack does go before he does damage, so if you want to put him at the end of a NP Brave Chain, or you do want to give him stuff like overcharge buffs with, I don't know, Himiko or Morgan, or maybe you want to give him Demonic Bodhisattva, I guess you could also do that, he will immediately start to see that attack gain. But some problems that I do have with Roland, even though he is packing some very powerful effects that I love to see on DPSs, like good survivability with the invul plus the defense, pretty decent battery having technically 30%, a spammable skill in the third skill, especially if you are using him with Koyenskaya, and then being able to remove his own buffs and all of the enemy's buffs as well. It's super nice. Built-in Pierce Invincibility, I really like it, but it's just one of those things that if you have him at NP1, you're just going to stick to probably some of the free-to-play servants. You're probably going to stick to your Bedivere, who does more damage than him at NP1, even though he doesn't have stuff like the Pierce Invincibility and whatnot. Bedivere does give the entire party, say, NP gain and defense, so he has a little bit of team utility, or you're just going to use Saber Hokusai because she's a free NP5 and does way more damage than Roland would do at NP1. But Roland is one of those servants that if you do get him to like NP3, 4, 5, then I think you really start to see his worth and his kit starts to come together. Although the one thing that I have found to be a little bit wonky is the NP refund. It's not bad, but it's not quite as good as you would like it to be. But since that's kind of my only gripe that I have with Roland, I can't really say that he's a bad servant by any stretch of the imagination. But he is definitely one of those servants, think of like a Kiara, that benefits immensely when you get higher NP copies. They're good at NP1, like I've always said that I think Kiara is fine at NP1, especially with all of her buffs, but you definitely feel a lot better when she's doing NP3 or even NP2 damage, and the same could be said with someone like Roland. You definitely feel like you're getting more out of him whenever you start to hit those NP2 and 3 levels. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on this one. Again, I'm sorry, I know I'm recording this in advance, but I do know that we're having the FGO Fest, but that is at 7:45 a.m. my time. I will just have to be a day behind on that one because a man's gotta sleep, man's gotta go to bed. So with that being said, I will catch you guys on the flip side, hopefully with some very exciting information. You know, I'm hoping I'm waking up to 30 million download campaign, pick whatever limited 5-star you want, and not 30 million download campaign, here's a 4-star, I guess, which limited 4-star wouldn't be too bad, but come on, isn't it more tantalizing to get that limited 5-star, even if it's just like year 4 and under, right? You know, you cut them off right at Castoria year 5, so that way everybody just can't pick the free, like, best unit in the game, but that would still be really good in and of itself. There are so many really good year 4 and under servants that I think are very, very strong. But now I'm starting to ramble, so I will just shut up and get out of here. You guys have a great rest of your day.